Well, thank you so much, and I'd like to thank all of the organizers and sponsors for putting on such a great event. And Babita, congratulations on your new baby. I am fond of telling people that it's the most wonderful, joyful way to ruin your life. And so, and also, as a person in the technology world, the most wonderful, joyful way to end your career is to be a person in tech and work on healthcare, which is what I'm doing now. The thing that I wanted to do today is talk about the future in healthcare from a technology perspective, with a particular focus on data. And as I am saying here on this slide, about the unreasonable effectiveness of data, but also the incredible challenges that data poses. Let me just start right in with an example. When your doctor takes a sample of your blood, she holds in her hand on the order of 1 million of your T cells, each one programmed to target a specific carrier of disease or antigen. In what has become one of the hot topics in biotech today, there has been intense study of the extracellular receptor, or T cell receptor, and the link between the genetics of that T cell receptor and that specificity on each T cell to each antigen. That study of the so-called T cell receptor repertoire, or TCR repertoire for short, is an intense area of study, very hot topic, and it just screams for a data analysis, because today we have many technologies to extract those T cells from that blood sample, provide a printout of the genetics of the T cell receptors, and from that surmise that we may have all the information we need to understand what diseases, what infectious diseases, what cancers, and what autoimmune disorders your body is coping with right now. And indeed, in our labs, in our collaborations with a Seattle biotech firm, Adaptive Biotechnologies, but also in academic and commercial labs around the world, there's increasing evidence that that data analysis may actually be valid. This is just one very simple plot that is a very refined version of a study that was done actually almost 3 years ago, showing that with labeled T cell receptor repertoires, you can fairly directly train a deep learning model to do very precise classification of disease state. There are 3 things that I find incredibly cool about this, besides the fact that this is a very data-driven process. First of all, it actually appears possible now, and in fact, jointly with Adaptive Biotechnologies, we've been making remarkable progress on this, but we're not alone. There are laboratories around the world that are doing the same, to be able to extract these machine-learned models without the need to find large numbers of people, to get samples of TCR repertoires from large numbers of people with specific disease states. And in fact, by using a boosting technique derived from observing specific bindings of TCRs to antigens in an in vitro assay, what we're able to do is use a boosting technique in order to generate very large amounts. In fact, in our joint work with Adaptive Biotechnologies, on the order of 1 trillion labeled training data points from naive blood samples. And that is then putting us on the path of very rapidly improving the fidelity of these models. And so here you see similar results, but this time trained not from labeled samples, but from completely unlabeled samples from people with specific epitopes. A second thing that's very cool about this is, of course, this allows us to dream about potentially a universal diagnostic. A diagnostic that, using the same machine learning pipeline, might have the power to conduct early diagnosis of any infectious disease, any cancer, any autoimmune disorder. And while we are very early in stage here, we already see in our work with adaptive strong signals for autoimmune disorders like celiac disease or infectious diseases like Lyme disease and some cancers. And again, all with the same machine learning pipeline. And then the third thing that I find, just as a computer scientist, very cool about this, is that that machine learning pipeline bears striking similarity, and in fact is based on the same code base as our neural machine translation technology. The same technology that we use at Microsoft to translate, say, Mandarin into English. And the fact that you can actually harness the generality of the concept of machine learning to, in this case, instead of translating between natural languages, but translate the language of T-cell receptor DNA sequences to the language of antigens, is just from a computer science perspective, just a beautiful concept. And so these things end up being very, very cool. Now, when we're talking about language like this, we have, of course, very direct applications to language. And again, in companies around the world, in academic laboratories around the world, and of course, in my home base at Microsoft, we are making tremendously rapid, actually startling advances in natural language processing. And many of you have probably heard some things, and many of you are probably working with machine learning models based on ideas like BERT or GPT-2 or MASS. And internally, we also have been tuning these models that are commercial natural language processing products, machine reading technologies, speech recognition products, and tuning them for biomedical and healthcare applications. And this is just a simple screenshot showing just a snippet of a doctor's medical note being recoded and understood for processing, but using very specific coding and models tuned, in this case, for healthcare applications. And so it's so interesting that we can take machine learning models that are used for language and apply them to the analysis of TCR repertoires, but of course we have very direct applications as well. And it's not just about the clinical applications, say for doctor's notes, but also for accelerating progress in medical research. Today, if you just look on PubMed, just on one publication site, there are over 4,000 papers and abstracts being posted every day on PubMed. A very large fraction of those directly pertinent to, say, the field of clinical oncology. And so today, we are ingesting all of those papers on a daily basis and automatically deriving, using very narrowly focused machine reading, a knowledge graph that supports the decision support tool. And that decision support tool is being used by tumor boards at NCI-designated cancer centers today. And while it's still very early in this field, already we know that if you're able to constrain the field of use, in this case, just to oncology, that you're able to get more than adequate fidelity in the extraction of knowledge graphs from whole document natural language understanding or machine reading. Very, very exciting. And please stay tuned for more significant news about this from some of our cancer center partners in the coming weeks. And then, in addition to that research advance, as well as clinical practice in the case of molecular tumor boards, there is the bread and butter, at least for Microsoft, of productivity, or more generally, improving the day-to-day working satisfaction of information workers around the world. What at Microsoft we refer to as empowerment. And I think many of us, of course, are well aware of the burnout. Much of that burnout in physicians, nurses, administrators today is based on the incredible burden of clinical documentation. And so again, the kinds of machine learning techniques, the kinds of AI technologies that we see being used for NLP also hold out the promise of being able to reduce the burden of clinical documentation in important ways. And in fact, again, we see in laboratories around the world, in pretty much all of the major tech companies, and in our operation at Microsoft, very intensive work. In fact, product commitments now being made. And I predict within 12 to 18 months, we'll see real product on the market from multiple companies. Products that are able to just listen and observe a doctor's work and use that observation to reduce the burden of clinical documentation. And so let me just show a quick video demonstration of the particular platform for that purpose that we've been developing at Microsoft called EmpowerMD. And so we're missing audio, and so what I'll do is...
While the doctor focuses on the patient, the system captures the dialogue.
Really tired lately or anything like that?
I'm just a little tired from it.
Okay. How about any problems with, have you noticed a fever or just generally feeling unwell?
No.
Okay. You mentioned the headaches.
Just the headache, yeah.
Integrating this dialogue with context from the patient's health record, a learning system in the cloud generates a medical note. After the visit, the doctor can easily edit the note generated by the system. Let's see how this technology works. The intelligent scribe extracts clinical content from the dialogue and classifies it to standard sections of the medical note. It also identifies clinically relevant concepts. The clinical content is synthesized to generate note suggestions. The doctor can refer to the original transcript for more context on the suggestion. The system flags suggestions that need the doctor's attention. As she corrects the suggestions, the system learns her choices. The doctor is always in full control of the note and can modify it. She can capture the patient's speech. She can convert conversational speech to medical terms. And she can personalize the content of the note. Here's an example of how the review of systems could be presented. The intelligent scribe captures all changes and learns from them. This simplifies note creation. Over time, the doctor makes fewer edits to the medical note. Finally, the doctor can view important events in the patient's journey. This helps her with context for future visits. The intelligent scribe empowers doctors to focus more of their time on patients. This is a foundation for building a learning system that synthesizes medical knowledge at scale.
So when you see here, I want to ground things in reality a little bit and disclose that a fully intelligent scribe for general practice is something that, in our estimation at Microsoft, is still a little bit over the horizon. I still view this as somewhat future-oriented. However, in our pilot deployments in very specific specialties, we are getting very good results. And we believe we're not alone in the industry in this regard. And so what is very important to understand is that the underlying architectures of these systems are learning systems, but furthermore, are systems that architecturally have a chance to ride the AI wave, that as our computational power, as our access to data, and as our algorithms improve over time, the architectures are robust enough to improve along with all of those trends. And so what we can expect over the coming years is increasing practicality and increasing generality for these types of systems. And while it may take a few years to have a fully general and fully intelligent scribe of the sort that you see here, and incidentally, this is something that has been incredibly moving for us because in our pilot tests, we literally see the conversion of tears of frustration, literal tears in clinicians, to tears of joy. But there are much simpler and more narrowly focused nearer-term applications. Imagine the application of automatically highlighting social determinants data from case manager telephone calls or from house calls. Imagine the possibilities of capturing transcript audio and extracting relevant notes in hands-free situations in surgical theater or in a coroner's laboratory. There are dozens of applications that have been identified, both by our team and by other teams around the world. And these applications, each one adds another brick in the wall to kind of hold back this incredibly destructive burden of documentation, while still preserving our ability to create a foundation of digital data for future healthcare. And already we see the signs of this today in much simpler applications, such as in intelligent chatbots. We are seeing literally thousands of healthcare organizations starting to pilot, or in some cases go to full-fledged commercial deployment of intelligent chatbots in order to have a much more direct and knowledgeable connection to end consumers. These are just two examples of the HealthBot application framework at Microsoft that are being used. The one on the left being used by Premera Blue Cross to help customers answer questions about their health benefits or questions about their bills. And on the right, the QuestBot by Quest Diagnostics to help consumers directly understand their lab test results or where to go and when to go for the lab test or to make appointments for lab tests. And so these things are already making their way into commercial practice. And so as we stand back, we just see a tremendous push that is happening today, but has the possibility of getting better and better and better as the underlying foundational technology improves. Technologies that help us understand the patient better, technologies to improve the productivity and the day-to-day working satisfaction of people on the front lines of healthcare, and technologies to help make the dream of precision medicine a reality for everybody. And all of this is founded today on data. And over again, we find that when we get ready access to relevant data, we can come up with unreasonably effective technologies. And so now the question is, what is holding us back? And here, I like to think of the old poem by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, which has the famous line, "Water, water everywhere, nor any drop to drink." And in fact, while we're on the water analogy, one of the great frustrations for me and all of my colleagues and competitors, I believe, around the world, has been what I refer to as a health data funnel. At Microsoft, we have just about 170,000 commercial relationships in the healthcare industry. Essentially, every healthcare organization on the planet is a commercial customer for Microsoft. Out of that population, it is not hard to get excited in a conversation with an organization to find some great thing to do with a treasure trove of data that that organization has and link them up with data scientists, machine learning and AI researchers, and engineers in our laboratories, and go out and do it. And we write an MOU or a letter of intent, get into an agreement to work on this. And time passes. Lots of legal and compliance complexities, and about 1/4 of those actually turns into actual agreement and data transfer. And then about 1/10 of those turn into data that can, in a compliant way, be exposed to the relevant machine learning tools. And then 1/5 of those turn out to be situations where we're able to expose that data to our own data scientists and machine learning researchers. And on and on. And I'm sure many of you in this room have experienced this. A year or a year and a half passes, and by the time you get there, what you started off with hundreds or thousands of opportunities, ends up being just a handful of opportunities that actually lead to meaningful results and get into the operational workflow in a healthcare organization. That health data funnel is a tremendous source of difficulty. And so at Microsoft, one of the most intensive areas of focus for our work has been on that problem. It is the one area where we have felt globally, in order to unlock or unleash all the opportunities and possibilities of AI in healthcare, that we thought we could make the biggest difference, and that a company like Microsoft with a hyperscale cloud infrastructure could also find a path to the most scalable impact. There are many aspects to that effort, and it is a major undertaking. And sometimes I joke it's also, in some sense, the least sexy thing going on in health tech today, but so important and foundational. And just one small but crucial element of this has been in, as we say at Microsoft, getting all of Microsoft's platforms and services and products to speak the language of health data. And one emerging technology for that, one emerging data standard that we believe is very important is Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources, or FHIR, which comprise a set of data models for healthcare, an API specification for exchanging those data models, and then a set of tools and services for interacting with those APIs. At Microsoft, we've taken the commitment to integrating FHIR into the core of our cloud, Azure. So this is not a separate platform, but instead is elevating FHIR as well as HL7, DICOM, BAM, and other healthcare data types as first-class data types in the very core of the operating system of our cloud. And we have taken that approach because we believe ultimately that our customers and partners and developers will benefit from the fact that all of the platforms and services for event processing, for persistence of data, for machine learning and cognitive services, all will benefit from natively speaking the language of health data. But we also believe that health data itself is going to be the biggest data and compute workload 10 years from now in the cloud. And so it stands to reason, therefore, that it should be a first-class data type. And we have been strongly encouraging not only all of our partners and customers to do the same and take the same approach, but even our competitors to do the same. Now, I've been spending a lot of time on data, and we are very much embarking on having data be much more liquid in the cloud in order to expose all of it to much better AI technologies. But I wanted to close with a more general comment that while today a lot of the excitement is around data, and for the next decade we'll be very, very focused on harnessing that data for the greater good in healthcare and life sciences. But in a sense, that is just the tip of the iceberg. And so notionally, if we think about this fuzzy thing, which we might refer to as intelligence, and our current excitement about artificial intelligence, and we don't exactly know what AI is, it's an elusive term to define. But if you think about it, roughly speaking, as some subset of the concept of intelligence, it might be one and the same thing, but we might think of it also as something different, perhaps a subset. What we are working on today in the realm of machine learning is just a tiny portion of this idea of artificial intelligence. It is just a tiny portion of the study of artificial intelligence that pertains to making a machine that improves with experience. And that academic study and the kind of spectacular way that that academic study has closed the gap to actual clinical and commercial practice has been just fueling so much of the excitement in venues just like this one here. But then even within the idea of machine learning, much of our focus is on the tiny subset of machine learning, which is machine learning specifically from data. And as we are starting to see in somewhat more foundational research work in areas like reinforcement learning, is that there are other machine learning approaches that are much less dependent on data, and therefore are much less limited by our access to data, or the need for data, or the expense of data. And even today, much of the excitement that we see is not machine learning from any data, but machine learning in a supervised manner. In other words, machine learning based on data which is essentially the digital exhaust of human thought and activity. And the point here is that for all of the excitement that I'm guessing 95% of us sitting here in this room today have about AI in healthcare and about the possibilities of machine intelligence leading to better healthcare for all, it's all based on this little red dot today. And so the big takeaway for me is that for all of that excitement, and trust me, for a company like Microsoft, that little red dot will sustain our business well into the next decade. But the real future is so much wider and so much more vast than that. And so as we reflect back on that image of being thrown into the ocean and looking for a drop to drink and trying to figure out in what direction should we swim, we all must keep in mind, especially as scientists, that while we have a lot to harness and exploit for the greater good in supervised machine learning today, that there is this wider world that will be informed by fundamental research in the field of artificial intelligence. And that, I think, is just incredibly exciting and important. And so, with that, I think that Microsoft's specific commitment, which comes right from the top, from our CEO, Satya Nadella, to AI, and specifically to AI in healthcare, is a real mission. It's a mission that is not only directly pertinent to the growth of our current business, and in fact is the largest driver of growth for our business today, but stretches then all the way down into the most basic fundamental research that goes on in our laboratories around the world, both within Microsoft Research and with our academic colleagues at universities everywhere. So with that, thank you so much. It was really a pleasure to be here, and I'll be very happy to take questions. Thank you.